that's a violation of, if you will, contextual integrity. The context of that information is somehow changed. And so that's a notion of privacy informational privacy that I find seems to help. So now I just have a few sort of observations from all the various meetings I've been to about privacy in the last couple of years. And there's one group of privacy advocates will really feel you should have total control over information about yourself. I think that's basically not feasible anymore, because there is, in fact, there are cameras out there on the street in Europe, lots of cameras, and you don't have any real way of, you can wear a mask, I guess, but I don't see many people doing that. And we have, easy passes to track vehicle movement. We have cell phones that track us all over the place. So I think unless you're willing to forego a tremendous number of modern conveniences, you're not going to be able to totally control your information that relates to you. But we can retain, sorry about typos, some control over it. So there's a series of fair information practice principles that were first enunciated actually in the 1970s, a long time ago now. And they've been fairly influential throughout the world, I would say. And they actually were started by a committee that was headed by a computer scientist, Will Square, at that time the Rand Corporation. So very important work. And you can still see it in the structure that the Federal Trade Commission, which in the U.S. is one of the main sort of privacy enforcement mechanisms we have, at least over the commercial sector. And there are 5 elements of their framework, 4 or 5, depending on what you read. First is notice and awareness. Okay, so the idea is if there's a system of records out there that has information about you in it, you should be able to find out about it. It shouldn't be a secret. Second is choice and consent. So you should have some ability to consent for the use of that record for some particular purpose. And you should be able to opt out if you want to opt out. And third, if there's a record about you, you should be able to see it. You should have access to it, and you should have, opportunity to either correct it, or if you want to have control of it, to correct it, maybe put a comment that you disagree with, or something like that. And the collector, the maintainer of that record, has a responsibility to maintain its integrity and security. Okay, so we should start it. And finally, there should be some enforcement, some sort of redress if something bad happens. So are those principles still relevant? Yes, I think they are. But if you look at the history over the past 45 years, 40 years, I guess now, since they were enunciated first, most of us are aware of those things. In the West, anyway, probably when you go to the doctor's office and you sign a HIPAA release or something like that, and you don't, there are issues in the application of these things. And in particular, notice and choice these days is very hard to manage. If you've ever, how many people have here ever read a privacy policy online?
Get them in the mail. This bank sends them to you every 6 months. But I'm weird.
So this, I would expect if any audience has people that read that, this is the audience that, I had my class last year, actually, I downloaded, 20 or so of these privacy policies. And it was an interesting exercise. Most of them were at least 10 pages long, the commercial ones. The government ones were actually much shorter, because the government has laws that regulate them. And so the government policies, relatively speaking, are clear. Commercial policies, if you look at them, I would say, to me, mostly, they're there to protect the companies, not to really inform you about what they're doing. And so that's the sense of present result you get. Second, as someone mentioned just in one of the previous talks, you don't generally have any real negotiating power about this. If you want to use the service, you're going to have to agree to the policy. And so, and you have the ability not to use the service. That's the level of granularity. If it's a medical service in particular, you're probably not going to decline. So many systems now collect data without any user transaction. So surveillance, we've talked about, license plate readers are out there. traffic. And you don't have any checkbox when you go past the camera that says, I want to opt out of this camera. It's just not feasible, okay? So that's an issue. Another area that's been much in the public discussion around here has been mass surveillance. What are the benefits of mass surveillance? What are the costs? A lot of these arguments often get phrased in terms of, well, we need national security, and that's balanced often against the privacy loss for an individual. But that argument seems to me is not quite fair. You really have to balance the loss of privacy, not just for the individual, but for the country as a whole. And it's a question we'll come back to. Okay? But I think that you have to look at these arguments. When you're looking at these arguments, try to be sure that they're apples to apples. If you say, you're only going to lose a little privacy and the country's going to gain a lot, well, the country's probably going to gain a lot unless a lot of people lose a little privacy. And so, what's the effect of that? We need to be able to assess that. So, anonymization is another one of those things. So, how much can anonymization help? Re-identification of subjects has proven to be, if you have outside sources of data, generally speaking, it's very hard to prevent. And there are a number of examples of this that have been in the press. AOL released some search data and got in a lot of trouble. Netflix reviews viewing data records, and some of my friends down at the University of Texas and other places were able to reverse engineer that and take some outside things to bear and say, yes, we can tell it's this person's record. So if somebody really wants to work at it, re-identification is pretty hard to prevent in practice. There are techniques, and you can find lots of papers about this for working on it. The second thing that anonymization inevitably does is it reduces the value of the analysis that can be accomplished. Okay, you're adding noise to data, you're deleting records from data. You're not going to have quite the same results as you would if you have data. So, just summarizing, privacy is not dead. Privacy is total control over PII, personally identifiable information. Is it feasible? Fair information practices remain valid, but difficult to apply. Existing nodes and placements, difficult when sensors cause problems. And arguments that pit societal gains against individual losses are not really fair, and data anonymization is not really going to save us, I think. So those are just sort of observations which we can discuss. Now, going over to sort of the big data side of things, which this room is partly about. This has been obviously a very hot topic over the last few years and a source of a lot of intellectual interest and commercial interest. And so we hope for a number of good things from this data science. Calling it cybersecurity, we hope to better be able to distinguish malware, for example. That's just one example. In energy, we're going to have smart meters and lots of data. We're going to hopefully get a better understanding of energy consumption patterns and the effects of incentives on consumption. In governance, we hope to get a better understanding of what the public policies we put in place for welfare, for example, what those effects are. In commerce, certainly hope to get offered things in a more convenient way and potentially better prices, but there's an issue about that. Transportation, more efficient routing, transportation systems based on travel patterns, and in healthcare particularly, that's an area where I think everyone hopes for the future that we'll learn things from patient records of many patients. Hopefully will benefit each of us individually and all of us collectively. There's actually a term I ran across just recently, is infodemiology, which is sort of epidemiology using big data, using information. So maybe information that's not at all information that came from your browsing habits rather than from your visit to the doctor. Okay, so there's an article in Science last summer about this, saying you could for example, potentially detect people's possibility of postpartum depression in women based on, what they were looking at on Facebook and writing and so on. So we could do diagnosis based on that data. So that's, that's just one example. But we hope for a lot. What would be interesting is, can we figure out, can we characterize the utility we hope to get out of these things in some way? That's a really hard problem, but we can look at. So some privacy issues that raised by this in my view. First, public revelation of, again, this is informational privacy we're talking about now, right? Public revelation of identity of participants in the data set, thereby potentially revealing personal habits of various kinds. The use of data for other purposes. So data gets collected for one purpose. There may or may not have been any real consent. It can be used for other purposes pretty freely in the US these days. I don't know if it's better in Europe, how well that's enforced. Big concern is that the data will be used to discriminate in unfair or illegal ways. And so we have, in this country, some legislation that's designed to try to prevent discrimination, for example, in making loans to people based on racial characteristics. But if you've got, one of the big problems is predictive algorithms may, in effect, guess sensitive data. Pregnancy is one example that we've got a lot of press. We can talk about that example. But other things as well. And those predictive algorithms may, in fact, discriminate on forbidden parameters, but you may not know it. In fact, even the company doing it may not be aware of it. So in which case, they may be, in fact, violating the law because they're using a machine learning algorithm that learned characteristics without ever, looking at the forbidden characteristics, other characteristics are related to them, and you end up with that. And one of the things that is worrisome to a lot of people is, in many cases, you can't look at the machine learning program and the data that it's based on and really understand what it's doing and explain how it's behaving. So that's a problem. So what can we do about that with these problems with current technologies? There are some technologies we talked about, anonymization. The place in the U.S. where that comes into play the most, perhaps, is in medical records, because under HIPAA, which governs information that's held by in health records infrastructure, not necessarily so if you have information and you remove 17 specific parameters from that information, including name, address, social security number, and 14 others, then that record is deemed to be de-identified. It's deemed to be anonymous, and now you can use it for research and be more or less immune from being prosecuted. Doesn't mean it's really de-identified. Almost nothing is really de-identified these days. But it provides a recipe for people to use. Differential privacy. I think there was a paper using this technique this morning. The idea is that you can prevent the inference that a subject is included or not in a data set, in effect by adding noise to the data. Problem with that is you can sort of use up the data set. If you ask enough questions of it, the next question is liable to reveal an identity and you won't be able to use it anymore. And of course, you have this problem that you're adding noise to the results, so how accurate it's going to be, you'll lose some degree of accuracy. Private information retrieval, this is where through cryptographic techniques you can basically encrypt a database in a certain way and encrypt the question in a certain way, and the holder of the database can't tell what question was asked, but the answer gets sent back, and the person asking the question can decrypt the answer without the owner of the database knowing what the question was. That may raise policy questions about if there are certain questions you don't want to ask of your database. Think about that as well. But that's a technique that's was thought of a long time ago and was, too computationally burdensome